Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War. My name is Craig Allison, and I'll be your host. So today's a special podcast for me. Chris Turner and his daughter Savannah are here today. Chris and I go pretty far back. It's been you started coming to the Christian Student Center back before we did any kind of renovations or anything, and this place looked pretty rough. Brought your kids and they helped out. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. I remember, and actually count that as part of their spiritual growth from the beginning. And so it's this place has been special to us since at least 2011, since we moved here.
For those of you that don't know Chris Turner, he has just some really special kids. From a young age, they were coming here, and they would just jump in and help out in any way. So I am very thankful to have a person like Chris in my life. All right, so Chris, I want to set the stage a little bit as we begin this podcast. Not the easiest interview or podcast that I've done because of the subject matter that we're going to be dealing with today. So a few years back, and again, this is just to set the stage. A few years back, and you can give the actual, how many years we're going back. Not too many. You and your wife Lisa, you get that process of Savannah being sick and not feeling well, and as things progress, there's that one conversation that you and the doctors had where it becomes clear what's going on. So if you don't mind just briefly setting the stage for how things led up to that moment.
Yeah, and I'd just like to thank you for allowing us. This has been kind of our heart to really share how God moved in all of this, and so this is a great opportunity to do that. So first and foremost, just all praise and glory to Him for leading us to this very moment right here where we get to sit and actually talk about this. Craig, so in 2016, in December of 2016, we noticed a mass on Savannah's left upper jaw, and it didn't alarm us a whole lot, and the first dentist we went to didn't alarm him either. There was supposed to be a tooth coming in that area. Excuse me. So we kind of went on about our holiday business, and it became a lot more serious when we got back. Another dentist tried to drain that area, and nothing came out. So we were referred to an oral surgeon here in town, and through that process is where we learned what we were truly facing, which was an osteosarcoma, is a bone cancer usually found in long bones of the body, and very rarely found in some of the facial bones, which in Savannah's case was this.
Okay, so let me stop you right there for just a second. Chris, I think the listeners, it would be good for them to know what your background is as far as your occupation.
My background is nurse anesthesia.
Which is what exactly?
Just doing anesthesia for any surgical cases. Sometimes, for example, just the background for our profession, when we're in the hospital, we work side by side with anesthesiologists sometimes. Or if we work out in the community like I'm at right now, we're working in surgical centers, and we are in a solo practice at the moment. So I'm more familiar with acute care nursing, intensive care nursing, and so enough to know what we've been dealing with, or when we started.
And this is a postgraduate level degree that's required to be a nurse anesthetist. Is that, am I saying that correctly?
Right. Yes, it's a master's program, actually a doctorate program now, but basically I started out as a intensive care nurse, and then went back to school for nurse anesthesia, and it's similar. It's a different pathway than like nurse practitioners take, but it's an advanced nursing degree.
So, and I'm bringing that up simply for the fact that you're not a layman going into this. So when you're sitting down and the doctor is saying some things, you're you're kind of clued in maybe more than the normal mom or dad sitting there would be when the doctor's giving the diagnosis. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes, particularly as we went on. In the beginning, honestly, I was not familiar with the term osteosarcoma. It was a new term to me. And pediatric cancer was something that I had no experience with um, at all, whether in a career or personal life. So that was all new. Later on, as she went through chemo and just some of the health effects from that came up, there was some, that's where it got a little scary for me, a lot more scary, I would say.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that because I'm assuming there's a point in time during this entire process where the full impact of what you and Lisa are facing with your daughter here, and if I can ask you that specific question, when the ton of bricks basically drops and you realize, oh wow, that this is real, our daughter has cancer. What goes through your mind at that point as a dad?
It's amazing what goes through my mind, or what went through my mind at that moment. I can remember taking the phone call as clear as me and you sitting here, and it was a 3:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in late January of 2017. And what went through my mind, amazing enough, when the doctor answered the phone, because I had called him back. He had called and left a message just letting us know that results were in. And so as soon as I called back, he got right on the phone and he started talking about what we were dealing with. And what went through my mind, amazing enough, was to actually write down everything that he needed me to write down for our appointments at Vanderbilt the very next day. He had already scheduled a day full of tests and scans. Vanderbilt was already waiting on us. And so what went through my mind was to actually, as my heart was racing, I mean, it was beating and panic was setting in. But God gave the grace to, in that moment, to write down what I needed to write down to get on the road the very next morning.
Do you think was it like a shock kind of thing, or your just mind automatically went to this pragmatic mode?
Well, at first, and when I got off the phone, the first thing I yelled out in the house, literally, and I was alone, praise God for that. But I yelled out in the house that, God, you had us already. You didn't have to do this. And I kept saying that over and over, just screaming it out. And eventually, getting on my knees in prayer before Lisa and the kids got home from where they were at that day.
Did you have to break the news to your wife?
I did. I also think that was God's grace, because he had tried to call her while she was driving and couldn't get her. Mm-hmm. And I think if she had answered the phone based on her reaction at home when I told her, then, I don't know what the results of that would have been. But when I took her outside at first and left the kids inside, and I told her, and her knees buckled and she went down.
Lowest point?
The lowest point for me was in June of 2017. I had woke up early one morning. Savannah was supposed to have the birthday that we'd been waiting on. It had been, of course, a rough 5 or 6 months already. And we were looking forward to just at least one night of normalcy, having a birthday party at one of the elders at church had a pool at their house, and they were going to let us use their pool. I woke up that morning, and I just remember thinking, as it was raining a little bit, I was just had this thought over and over in my mind that she was going to be okay, everything was okay. She woke up shortly after that with a fever, and a fever in a chemo patient's over 100.4. And so in distress, instead of a birthday party, we went to the hospital to get her checked out, and turns out that she was a lot more severely sick than we realized at the moment. It wasn't just a fever, but that began a 10-day hospital stay. That was the absolute lowest point.
Okay, so highest point then, let's contrast that to what was the best thing about this whole journey.
We were just talking about that the other day. There was a few high points, things that we experienced while going through even the hospital stays, whether it was friends coming and just visiting. And there were some times where they actually got creative to have some different parties and have some friends come and visit in the hospital. And but I would say overall, as we were leaving the hospital for the very last time, she had finished chemo. We took a picture on the way out the door, and it was all of us going down the hallway. We were all exhausted looking. She had a mask on, and her hair was patchy, but we were smiling. So we had it's really neat because we looked like we had just been through this really tough battle, war. We all looked tired and scarred up, but we were on the way out. So that was a high point.
So, I'm sitting here listening to this, and as a dad myself, I'm trying to reconcile how, when you're in that situation as a Christian, how does something like that impact your faith? Because I think most Christians would like to be able to sit here and have a conversation. Say, my faith is good. My faith is strong. I mean, I struggle from time to time, but overall, I'm on this kind of even plateau. Ups and downs are natural, but you get something like this that just is a devastating thing as a dad, and I just, hearing you say that, Lisa, her legs just buckled. I mean, that tugs my heartstrings. How do you deal with the faith issues with that?
Well, that's interesting, and there's parts of that where you almost have to be going through a struggle to kind of identify with this. Paul talks about God gave him the grace to be what he was, and if you look back to where he has that transformation moment where Jesus confronts him in the road to Damascus, he says that, or there's a time where Jesus says that I'll show you how much he suffers for my name. And but when Paul talks about, even on all his suffering, when he talks about his calling, he talks about it as God's grace. So I would just blanket that statement with God's grace began at the very moment I took that phone call, what we were dealing with. And what I mean by that is, after Lisa gets the news and she recovers, we came back in, and immediately after we told the kids, and through tears and everything, we got on our knees and we declared before God that we would remain faithful through this, through all the uncertainty. That didn't mean that we were going to bow up and be stoic through this whole thing. That's not what happened. It just means that the Spirit moves in you in these moments to do exactly what God wants you to do if you're already open to His leading in the first place. And I can give you an example. By that Friday afternoon, through the whirlwind of tests and struggle that Savannah went through and our family went through, traveling to Vanderbilt and all the unknowns, I sat down at the computer and sent an email to our church. Basically, and I said in it too, that I was offering an invitation on a Friday afternoon. We usually call an invitation or altar call, whatever you call it, at church, whether it's a Wednesday or a Sunday. But I said, one thing I learned in that week was that do not let trouble find you being lukewarm with Christ. It was, if you don't have a relationship with Him already, get into that relationship as soon as you can, as quick as possible, because when trouble comes, and it does, if that Tuesday afternoon had been the first moment that we hit our knees and asked God to be with us, or whatever it was, I think it would have been a lot more of a whirlwind of panic than it was what it ended up being, which was we have this moment of just intense grief and devastation, but right behind that comes decision making, comforting, contacting the people we needed to contact, and actually knowing already Scripture to go to that would even offer the remotest of comfort, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, you're describing a Christian who's rooted and grounded, and that is such a powerful thing. One thing that you said that really stuck out to me, Chris, was that you guys, there wasn't a delay, there wasn't waiting, there wasn't milling around. You guys, your immediate reaction was to turn to God in prayer, and that action towards Him, I think, speaks volumes for maybe why your faith walk was not completely shattered like some Christians might be shattered in similar circumstances.
When we got to the end of this, when we walked out of that hospital and we finished 2017 and we went into 2018, I look back on the year, there was some taking stock and taking inventory of what we went through and what was lost and gained. And one of the things I firmly believe this to today is when we kneeled down, when me and Lisa walked back in the door and we told them, and we were all upset, when we got together as a family and we kneeled down and declared that we would remain faithful, I believe today that moment changed a lot of things. I think it put our faith on a trajectory to where God could use us the way that He intended to. And I also think it brought spiritual protection over our family. In Psalm 91, it says, "Those who take refuge in the Lord will rest." And that whole chapter is specifically dedicated to just calling out those who take refuge in the Lord, and those who do take refuge in the Lord will rest, will have strength. And I believe that we did that. And it wasn't that I had this planned in our head. I just think that was something as a dad we needed to do quickly so that that we could get under God's resting wing.
Well, Chris, was there something through this entire process other than God, obviously, that sustained you and just motivated you and kept you going, kept your head above the water, so to speak?
Yeah, it was others who reached out to us. There was a dad who reached out to me whose daughter had been through leukemia treatment, and he found me on Facebook, didn't know me, but he called and he said that, let me give you a few pointers, I guess, if you will. And he gave me some physical things, some things to help her with sickness, but he also gave me some spiritual things. Like this is the main one I'll never forget. He said, as a dad, this will be the hardest thing you ever have to face, watching your daughter suffer like this, and she will. And this was early on. He said, but you will see God in ways you've never seen Him before.
Overall impact to your family.
Well, in the middle of this virus pandemic situation and everything we're going through, using that, we're in a situation right now where, there's uncertainty in front of us. We're experiencing the financial aspect, downturn of this whole thing. But it seems to us, and we were just talking about this the other day, it seems like shameful to give any foothold to worry or anxiety in this after what we've been through.
So this is not a big deal for you right now.
It is, but it's also, we also know that and saw God move in ways that you read about in the Bible. And so, and knowing that, and He didn't wait long to do that. That's the other thing. He didn't wait long to move in our life in that. So to worry and to give in to anxiety now is like I said, it just seems like all of that for nothing.
Would you change anything if you could go back and you knew what was going to happen? And I normally I don't like this kind of question because it's water in the bridge. I mean, it's almost idiotic to say, yeah, what would you do if you could go back and because you can't, obviously. Right. You can't go back and change anything. But is there something that you said or something that you did that you wish you could go back and maybe do it a little bit differently? Or when you look back, are you happy with all your decisions and how everything was handled?
I don't think we would do anything differently. I don't think I feel like, and again, it was God's grace that gave us that opportunity. But I think at every turn, the decision making that we had to make because when you're dealing with this, when you're talking to the oncologist, a pediatric oncologist is telling you that you need to make this decision about your daughter right now. I feel like I almost feel like Nehemiah. What I love about Nehemiah, he would pray and then he would answer the king. I mean, he would make these decisions after almost kind of a quick prayer, and I feel like we did that. And I feel, so because of that, I feel like we were led exactly how God wanted to lead us.
One of the things that, and this is to our listeners, one of the things that Chris did is journaled. And journal's like a weak word to use in this particular situation, but he kept an account, almost like a daily log of all of the things that he was feeling and the things that the family was going through and the reports that he got back from the doctor. And this actually turned into something quite extraordinary, because at the end of this road, you didn't have a journal, you had a book basically of this entire experience that you and your family went through. And I know that that's, you're working on publication, or maybe, you've already moved past that point. I've been honored to read the rough copy, the rough draft, and it is an extraordinary thing. And can you just say a few words about that process?
Yeah, that we are in the process of moving to publishing. The typesetter is pretty much done with all of her work. We're just waiting on a copyright issue with Zondervan Company for the Bible, quoting the Bible through it, but it should be done. And after we get that finished, we're going to initiate the website, 501c3, all the things that we need to kind of go with that. But as far as the writing and editing and all is finished.
Really looking forward to seeing that finished product, Chris. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to, we saved the best for last. Sorry, Chris. Savannah's the star here, not you. So, Savannah, how old are you now?
I'm 13.
13. And when this all started, you were how old?
I was 10.
Okay, so you were a young girl, probably not really aware of the seriousness maybe of everything that was about to happen to you. So I'm going to ask you some questions that I would love to hear the answer to, coming from your perspective. So how does a 10-year-old girl at that point work through and figure out in your mind exactly what's going on? Like, okay, mom and dad just told me, and the doctor just told me I have cancer. How do you deal with that as a 10-year-old?
I don't know exactly what went through my mind. I wasn't sure what to think at the time. I was kind of confused. The first thing that probably went through my mind was I'm going to lose my hair. I was freaking out when I figured out that. I don't know why, because it wasn't that big of a deal, but it felt like it to me, because I wouldn't look normal and I wouldn't be like every other girl my age. So that's kind of what I was worried about, but I wasn't really worried about any of the other effects of cancer. That's basically all that I was worried.
So the scariest thing for you was basically losing your hair. Well, that's scary for a lot of people to lose their. It's scary for me as I get older. I am losing my hair, and so we're right there with you. So you heard me ask your dad just a minute ago about faith, your belief in God, okay, and maybe how much you love Jesus and you think about Jesus on a daily basis. So as you moved through past the whole, okay, I have cancer now, and you begin to realize that it's not just about losing your hair. There's a battle ahead of you. And so you start going through chemo and you start feeling really bad and really sick. And then, the real work of working and battling with cancer, that becomes a real thing for you. So I want to ask you, when you were going through that and you realized that cancer was more than just a word, how did your faith and the love that you have for God and the love that you have for Jesus, how did that change?
It changed a lot, because during chemo, when I was going through something hard, it made me kind of push closer to him. It sounds kind of weird, but like when I was going through that, I was scared, so the only thing I could think to doing was running toward God instead of running away from him.
And why did you do that? What was it that made you do that?
'Cause he's safe.
Because he's safe?
Yeah.
That's a great answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so by doing that, what was the result of you running to God?
Now I'm closer to him, and I get to share this story about what he did for me and with other girls who might be struggling with something like this, or anybody struggling with something like this.
Have you been able to talk to other people about this?
Oh yeah, a lot of people.
So give me an example of how that went.
It went good. I have a friend who's going through the same thing. He's losing his hair right now. He just started chemo. And then I have another friend who just ended chemo, and I get to celebrate that with them, and I get to tell them I'm praying for them. And then they ask me questions like, what did you do when, are these some of the effects of chemo? That's what the doctor said. Can you help me out on what to do with that? And I just kind of tell them some of the secrets that we did, like some of the chemo makes you sick, and something to help that is like having a mint in your mouth when you're taking chemo, and it kind of helps you not get as sick. So he kind of was struggling with doing that, I guess, and I just get to help him figure out what to do about all that in his life.
That is really something incredible, because I think that at such a young age, you've already figured out what it takes. A lot of adults a lifetime to figure out, and some of them never figuring it out. For the listeners listening to this podcast, I'm looking at an absolutely precious young lady. She looks a lot like Millie Bobby Brown, so she's just as cute as can be, and she's got this aura about her that just radiates peace and calmness and faith. And your story is really one that I think a lot of people can benefit from hearing, especially coming from somebody who I kind of already knew the answer, but talking to your dad, that for you stayed like right there. It just wasn't something where you fell completely apart and got angry at God and didn't want to have anything to do with him. You stayed true to him and just really basically never had a question about it. And that's a really important lesson, I think, that a lot of us can learn from. So I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked your dad. If you're looking back on this whole process, is there something that you would have changed?
I mean, God had a plan the whole way through, and I wouldn't want to change his plan, but I had to get a feeding tube one time, and my dad, he kept pressuring me to eat stuff, because I wouldn't have had to get a feeding tube if I was eating stuff, but I would have eaten more, which sounds weird, but...
No, I know feeding tubes are no fun.
Yeah.
No bueno. Yeah, I can definitely appreciate that. So, Savannah, what are your future steps? Because I want to look past this whole process, because you're through it now, and that cloud has lifted, and so you're looking forward. What do you have going on in the future?
Well, we're planning on making a YouTube channel for like sharing our story, and I also want to be a motivational speaker. So I'm kind of this podcast might help that a little bit too. But once the book gets released that my dad's working on, we're gonna hopefully start that.
You're doing a fantastic job, by the way. So I think you're off to a good start. So I didn't know that you were bringing one of your other children with you. He's been quietly standing back behind. Christian is how 15, right? 15 years old. Big brother to Savannah, and he's not expecting this, but since he's here, I'm just going to ask him from the big brother's perspective as the sibling. How did you handle all this, Christian? Put that mic right up close to your mouth. Don't be shy.
Well, like the first thing that I thought of doing was like we all kind of just broke down, and that was like the first reaction to all of this. But like through all of this, it was like just probably the hardest thing seeing her go through that. And like I got into like a lot of different things. I was home alone a lot, and just like I just wasn't really right where I needed to be, and it was just like it was just painful to see her go through all that and all that stuff.
So as the big brother, and if you're a normal brother and sister, you fight and you have arguments and stuff. So did that change when she had cancer? Did you all of a sudden become a really super good big brother that never got everything she wanted, and you were great to her and all that, or how did that work out for you?
Yeah, I guess you could say that, but we that definitely did change my actions towards her. I mean, it's more of me and my other sister that will like sometimes go at it, but it was funny because like during all of that that whole year, I was just like, just take care of her, I guess.
So yeah, you mentioned. I'm glad you said that because I completely forgot. You're a twin, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how did that work out with your twin having to watch you go through all of this, Savannah?
She went into mom mode. She would clean my room when I was in the hospital. She would wipe down everything. She had a Swiffer. Yeah. She was basically my little mom.
So would you guys say brothers and sisters, y'all are closer together since all of this happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Chris, Savannah, Christian, I want to thank all of you guys for coming in and being here with us. I know some of these questions are hard, especially trying to relive some of the more painful memories. So I want to thank you so much for sharing your story and being very, very open and honest. Chris, is there anything? Have I missed anything that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, one thing I was thinking as we were talking a little bit too, if this in any way sounded like a family that had it all together, that we went from A to B, sometimes as I describe that, it kind of sounds like I'm saying that. That's not the case. There were so many times where Savannah would be going through something, some sickness, some fever from chemo, and I would go to the bathroom and I would just have this intense cry and conversation with God, just begging why and things like that. So if any of this sounds like we had a faith that was just solid and strong, that we just went through this with just this just this power, the power was all from God. If anybody looked at us and said, hey, how do you have a faith like that? How could you send that email on the Friday afternoon after you just found out your daughter had cancer and the road ahead of her? It was all because His Spirit in us just led us to do that, and that's the point. Don't let trouble find you lukewarm with Christ. Get close to Him, and get close to Him now, because trouble does come in whatever form it is, and that's where your strength comes from. That's it.
Yeah, the picture I get when you describe this story, Chris, is not one where I think, you guys didn't have your meltdowns and just the stress of the situation, because I don't know how you can be a human being and not have that type of response at some point during this entire process. What stands out in my mind, though, and what rings clear to me, is amidst all of the normal human reactions that you guys had, you turned to God time and time and time again. There was never a time that, at least that I can't see, where He was not the centerpiece of y'all's family and coming together and pulling together. And really saying, you know what, God, you've got this, and no matter what happens, we know that it's going to be for the good. And that is the lesson that I take away from this. That's the lesson that I need to hear as far as my own faith walk with God, and I can't thank you enough for that.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Okay, folks, that wraps up this week's episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War. I'm glad you were able to join us. I hope this particular podcast has been a benefit to you. Next week's episode, we're going to have some local leadership, actually from our very own Central Church of Christ, talk about the unique challenges of guiding a church through these unprecedented times with the coronavirus, having to cancel services. I don't know of any leadership in any church right now who the congregation is saying, oh, they're making all the right decisions. You know, you cancel services. Some people think that's exactly what you ought to be doing, and some people think, well, what in the world is going on? How can our church leadership cancel church? That just can't be right. So we're going to talk about some of these issues with the church leadership, get their perspective, and maybe get some insight to those of us who need to be given some insight. So I hope you'll join us for that. I think it's going to be a captivating interview. At least I hope it will be. Hey, folks, if you've liked this, if there's something that struck you about today's podcast, please go ahead and share this and encourage other people to listen if you feel like that they can get something beneficial out of it. As always, any kind of remarks or feedback that you have to help us improve, I'd be very, very excited to have that shared with me so we can make this as good as we possibly can. Final words. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 6 and 7. So we are always of good courage. We know that while we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. For we walk by faith, not by sight. Until next week, this is Craig Allison. Have a blessed week.